The emergency beacon cut through the void like a knife through silk, its desperate cry echoing across the quantum frequencies that connected civilized space. Admiral Sarah Chen watched the holographic display flicker to life aboard the bridge of the UES Prometheus, her weathered hands gripping the armrests of her command chair as the message began to play. "This is Governor Malik Okafor of the Kepler 442 colony," the distorted voice crackled through the speakers, heavy with exhaustion and barely contained panic. "We are under siege by the Zephyrian hegemony. Our orbital defenses have fallen. Our ground forces they're being overwhelmed. The hegemony isn't just occupying our world, they're harvesting our people. Please, anyone who receives this message, we need immediate military assistance. Time is running out." The transmission ended with a burst of static, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Chen's dark eyes swept across her senior staff, taking in their expressions of grim determination mixed with barely suppressed rage. The Kepler 442 colony wasn't just any settlement, it was home to nearly 3 million souls, including many families of Earth's military personnel. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Commander James Park spoke up from the communications station, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "I'm detecting similar distress calls from 6 other human colonies along the outer rim. The Zephyrians aren't just hitting Kepler 442, this is a coordinated assault." Chen felt her jaw clench. The Zephyrian hegemony had been testing humanity's resolve for months with minor border skirmishes and trade disruptions, but this was different. This was an all-out war declaration, and they'd chosen to announce it by attacking defenseless civilian populations. "Captain Morrison," she barked to her tactical officer, a scarred veteran whose left eye had been replaced with a cybernetic implant after the Battle of Proxima. "How long until we can reach Kepler 442? Morrison's organic eye narrowed as he consulted his instruments. "At maximum burn, 18 hours, ma'am. But we'll be going in alone. The nearest fleet elements are scattered across 3 sectors dealing with the other attacks." "Alone against what kind of force?" Chen demanded. "Intelligence suggests at least 40 Zephyrian vessels, ma'am. Heavy cruisers, destroyers, and their new Dreadnought-class ships. They've got us outnumbered 15-1. A younger officer might have hesitated, might have waited for reinforcements or contacted Fleet Command for orders. But Sarah Chen had earned her stars fighting impossible odds, and she'd learned long ago that sometimes the only way to win was to refuse to lose. "Set course for Kepler 442, maximum burn," she ordered. "And Lieutenant Park, send out the call." Park's fingers hesitated over his console. "Ma'am, the call? Are you sure?" "I'm sure, Lieutenant." "Send it on all frequencies, maximum range. Use the old codes, the ones from the War of Liberation. Every ship, every captain, every crew member who's ever worn the uniform of a Deathworlder navy." The lieutenant's expression shifted from uncertainty to understanding, then to something approaching awe. The call hadn't been used in over a decade, not since the last desperate battles against the Centauri Syndicate. It was a relic of humanity's darkest hour, when Earth's children had been scattered across the stars and hunted like animals by alien predators who thought them weak. Chen stood from her command chair, her voice carrying across the bridge with the authority of someone who'd clawed her way up from the enlisted ranks. "Send this message: the children of Earth are under attack. The harvest ships are among us. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Navy, calling all Deathworlders to battle. Honor the fallen. Protect the innocent. Show them why we earned that name." Park's hands flew over his console, encoding the message with authentication codes that hadn't been used since the old wars. The transmission burst outward at faster-than-light speeds, carrying with it the weight of humanity's collective fury. Chen turned to address her bridge crew, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to face. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to remind the galaxy why humanity doesn't negotiate with slavers. Morrison, I want every weapon system online and ready. Engineering, push the reactors to 110%. Navigation, plot the fastest course to Kepler 442, and prepare for immediate combat deployment upon arrival." The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as her crew threw themselves into their preparations. Chen watched them work with pride swelling in her chest. These were the children of Earth, the descendants of a species that had crawled out of the primordial soup of a death world and decided to reach for the stars despite everything the universe threw at them. As the Prometheus accelerated toward the edge of the system, Chen allowed herself a moment to remember how humanity had earned its fearsome reputation. Other species had evolved on garden worlds, with stable climates and abundant resources. Earth had forged its children in fire and ice, in the crushing depths of ocean trenches and the thin air of mountain peaks. Humanity had learned to survive by being adaptable, aggressive, and absolutely unwilling to give up. The first alien contact had been a wake-up call for the galaxy. The Altarian collective had approached Earth with the assumption that humans would be easy prey, another primitive species to be enslaved and exploited. They'd learned better at the Battle of Luna, where human defenders had held their ground against impossible odds, turning the moon's surface into a graveyard of alien ships. But it was the counterattack that had truly shocked the galaxy. Human ships, crewed by beings who treated death as just another obstacle to overcome, had pursued the Altarians back to their homeworld. The siege of Alteria Prime had lasted 3 years, with human forces displaying a level of stubborn determination that other species found deeply unsettling. The term Deathworlder had started as an insult, a way for more civilized species to express their horror at humanity's willingness to fight and die for principles that meant nothing to beings who had never known true hardship. But humans had embraced the name, wearing it like a badge of honor. Admiral, Park's voice cut through her reminiscences. I'm picking up responses to the call. The first ship just acknowledged. It's the RSS Valkyrie, Captain Elena Vasquez commanding. She's en route from the Tau Ceti sector. Chen nodded, unsurprised. Vasquez was one of the old guard, a captain who'd earned her command during the Syndicate Wars. If anyone would answer the call, it would be her. More responses coming in, Park continued, his voice gaining excitement. The TNS Mjolnir, Captain Erickson. The USS Liberty Bell, Captain Washington. The CSV Maple Leaf, Captain McDonald. Ma'am, I'm counting 12 ships so far, and more keep responding. Chen felt a grim smile tug at her lips. The Deathworlder fleets might be scattered across human space, but they were still connected by bonds forged in the fires of war. When one of their own called for help, they answered. Keep monitoring, Lieutenant. And patch me through to the fleet as they arrive. We're going to need coordination if we're going to pull this off. Hours passed as the Prometheus burned through space, her crew working with quiet efficiency to prepare for the battle ahead. Chen found herself pacing the bridge, checking and rechecking their preparations. The tactical displays showed a growing constellation of friendly contacts converging on Kepler 442 from across human space. The first major surprise came when Captain Vasquez's voice crackled through the communications array. Admiral Chen, this is Captain Vasquez of the RSS Valkyrie. I'm not alone, I've got the entire Russian Fifth Fleet with me. Admiral Petrov sends his regards and says to tell you that the bastards picked the wrong species to mess with. Chen's eyebrows rose. The Russian Fifth Fleet was one of the most powerful formations in human space, with 6 heavy cruisers and dozens of support vessels. If Petrov was bringing his entire fleet, this was going to be more than a rescue mission, it was going to be a demonstration. More contacts, Admiral, Park reported. The Chinese Expeditionary Force, 12 ships strong. The Brazilian Deep Space Navy, 8 vessels. The Indian Colonial Defense Force, 15 ships. Ma'am, I'm showing 47 confirmed vessels so far, with more still arriving. Chen stared at the tactical display in amazement. The call had gone out less than 6 hours ago, and already they had enough firepower to make the Zephyrians reconsider their life choices. But she knew it wasn't just about the ships, it was about the message they were sending. Put me through to the fleet, she ordered. Park nodded and opened a channel. Fleet communications online, Admiral. Chen keyed her microphone, her voice carrying across the void to dozens of ships and thousands of crew members. This is Admiral Chen to all vessels responding to the call. I want to thank each and every one of you for dropping everything to answer the distress of our people. What we're about to do isn't just about rescuing the Kepler 442 colony, it's about sending a message to every alien species that thinks humanity is weak. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Zephyrians chose to attack our civilians because they thought we were scattered and disorganized. They thought we'd negotiate rather than fight. They were wrong. Today, we show them what happens when Deathworlders unite. Today, we remind the galaxy why our species earned that name. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of captains acknowledged her words, their voices carrying across the fleet channels with a mixture of determination and barely contained rage. These were the children of Earth, and they were going to war. The first phase of the battle began 12 hours later, when the combined fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. The sight that greeted them was enough to make even hardened veterans clench their fists in fury. The Zephyrian fleet had arranged itself in a loose blockade around the colony world, their sleek ships gleaming like silver daggers against the starfield. But it was the massive harvest ships that drew the most attention, kilometer-long vessels designed to process entire populations into whatever biomaterials the hegemony required. Tactical analysis, Chen snapped. Captain Morrison's voice was tight with controlled anger. 43 Zephyrian vessels, including 6 harvest ships. They've got the colony world under orbital bombardment, but they're being careful not to damage the population centers too badly. They want the people alive. Not anymore, Chen growled. All ships, assume attack formation. We're going in hot and fast. Priority targets are the harvest ships. I want those abominations turned into scrap metal. The fleet began to move, 51 ships of various sizes and nationalities united under the banner of humanity's rage. The Zephyrians detected them almost immediately, their formation shifting to meet the threat. Incoming transmission from the Zephyrian flagship, Park reported. On screen, Chen ordered. The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing the angular features of a Zephyrian commander. The alien's crystalline exoskeleton caught the light from his ship's bridge, giving him an almost ethereal appearance that might have been beautiful if not for the cold calculation in his multifaceted eyes. Human Admiral, the Zephyrian spoke, his voice carrying the harmonic overtones that characterized his species. I am Fleet Commander Zifkara of the Hegemony. Your presence here is unexpected, but ultimately irrelevant. You are outnumbered and outgunned. Withdraw now, and we will allow you to live. Chen stood slowly, her expression hardening into something that would have made a stone statue nervous. Fleet Commander, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Navy. I'm going to give you one chance to withdraw your forces and release the colonists. If you refuse, we're going to turn your pretty ships into expanding clouds of plasma. Zifkara's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Admiral Chen, your reputation precedes you. But even Deathworlders can die. We have 43 ships to your 51. The mathematics are not in your favor. Commander, Chen replied, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty, you're about to learn that humans don't do math the same way everyone else does. We don't calculate odds, we calculate how many of your ships we can take with us. And the answer is all of them. The transmission cut out, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Chen turned to her tactical officer. Morrison, deploy the fleet in wolf pack formation. I want the heavy cruisers to engage their main battle line while the destroyers and frigates go after those harvest ships. Admiral, Captain Vasquez's voice crackled through the communications array, the Russian Fifth is requesting permission to demonstrate their new plasma lance system. Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. Permission granted, Captain. Show them what Deathworlders have been working on. The battle began with a thunderous exchange of fire that lit up the void like a newborn star. The Zephyrians opened with their standard tactics, expecting the human fleet to fall back and regroup in the face of their superior numbers. Instead, the Deathworlders charged straight into the enemy formation with a ferocity that caught the aliens completely off guard. The Russian flagship RSS Volga led the charge, her massive plasma lance system carving through the enemy formation like a sword through silk. The weapon was something new, a breakthrough in human military technology that focused stellar-level energies into a coherent beam capable of cutting through the heaviest armor. Direct hit on the Zephyrian flagship. Morrison shouted over the din of battle. Their shields are down, and I'm detecting massive hull breaches. But the Zephyrians weren't helpless. Their ships returned fire with weapons that bent space itself, creating localized gravity wells that could crush smaller vessels.
The human destroyer TNS Odin took a direct hit and disappeared in a flash of twisted metal and escaping atmosphere. "Odin is gone," Park reported, his voice heavy with grief. "All hands lost."
Chen felt the familiar weight of command settle on her shoulders. Every ship lost, every life sacrificed, would be on her conscience for the rest of her days. But she'd learned long ago that the only way to honor the dead was to make their sacrifice count. "All ships, continue the attack," she ordered.
"Remember the Odin. Make them pay for every one of our people they've taken."
The battle raged for 3 hours, with ships on both sides trading devastating blows. The human fleet fought with the desperate fury of a cornered animal, while the Zephyrians demonstrated the cold precision of a superior technology.
But there was something the aliens hadn't counted on: the human willingness to sacrifice everything for their principles.
The turning point came when Captain Washington of the USS Liberty Bell made a decision that would be remembered in military academies for generations. His ship had taken critical damage and was venting atmosphere, but he had one last card to play. "All ships, this is Captain Washington," his voice carried across the fleet channels, calm despite the chaos around him.
"Liberty Bell is going critical. We're making a run at the harvest ships. Tell my wife I love her."
The Liberty Bell, her hull cracked and bleeding fire, accelerated toward the largest of the harvest ships. The Zephyrians tried to intercept her, but the other human ships provided covering fire that kept the aliens at bay just long enough. The explosion when the Liberty Bell's reactors overloaded was visible from orbit, a brilliant flash that consumed both ships in a sphere of annihilating energy. When the light faded, the harvest ship was gone, along with the thousands of colonists it had already processed.
"Washington saved them," Chen whispered, watching the expanding cloud of debris. "He saved them all."
The loss of the harvest ship and its commander seemed to break something in the Zephyrian formation. Their precise tactics began to falter, replaced by an almost desperate aggression that human captains recognized and exploited.
"They're breaking formation," Morrison reported. "The smaller ships are trying to withdraw." "Don't let them," Chen snapped. "All ships, pursue and destroy. No one leaves this system alive." The final phase of the battle was more execution than fight. The Zephyrian ships, designed for quick strikes against unprepared targets, weren't built for the sustained combat the Deathworlders preferred. One by one, they were hunted down and destroyed by human captains who treated the pursuit like a sacred duty. When the last Zephyrian ship exploded in a shower of crystalline fragments, the human fleet found itself alone in the system with the battered colony world below. The cost had been terrible: 7 ships lost, including the Liberty Bell, with hundreds of crew members killed or wounded. But they had won. The harvest ships were destroyed, the colony was free, and the Zephyrian hegemony had learned a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," she broadcast to the fleet. "Well done. You've honored the memory of our fallen and shown the galaxy what happens when Deathworlders unite. Begin rescue operations immediately. Let's get our people home." As the fleet began the grim task of rescuing survivors and treating the wounded, Chen found herself thinking about the larger implications of what they'd accomplished. The Zephyrian hegemony wasn't just any alien power, they were one of the major forces in the galaxy, with resources and technology that dwarfed humanity's capabilities. But they had underestimated the one thing that couldn't be measured in statistics or calculated in equations: the human spirit. The willingness to fight against impossible odds, to sacrifice everything for principles that other species found incomprehensible. The rescue operations took 6 hours, with human marines shuttling between damaged ships and the colony's surface to evacuate the wounded and assess the damage. The reports that came back painted a grim picture of what the Zephyrians had planned. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Park approached her with a data pad in his hands. "The colony medical officer wants to speak with you. He says it's urgent." Chen nodded and accepted the pad, watching as the haggard face of Dr. Michael Torres appeared on the screen. The man looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past few days, his dark hair streaked with premature gray and his eyes haunted by whatever he'd witnessed. "Admiral Chen," Torres began, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "I wanted to thank you and your people for what you've done. But I also need to tell you what we discovered about the Zephyrian operation here." Chen leaned forward, sensing the importance of what she was about to hear. "What did you find, Doctor?" Torres' expression grew even more grim.
The harvest ships weren't just collecting people for slave labor, Admiral.
They were conducting biological experiments. Genetic modification, neural mapping, psychological conditioning.
They were trying to create something.
A hybrid species that combined human adaptability with Zephyrian technology. The implications hit Chen like a physical blow.
The Zephyrians hadn't just been raiding human colonies, they'd been trying to weaponize humanity itself. The thought of human intelligence and determination combined with alien technology was terrifying in its implications.
How many colonies have they hit? She asked.
According to the data we recovered from their command ship, at least 12.
Maybe more. Admiral, they've been at this for months, and we only just found out about it.
Chen felt her blood run cold. If the Zephyrians had been conducting these experiments on multiple colonies, they might have already succeeded in creating the hybrid soldiers they were after. The thought of facing human tactical thinking backed by alien technology was enough to make even a veteran like her feel a chill of fear.
Doctor, I need you to compile everything you've found and transmit it to Fleet Command immediately.
This information needs to reach the highest levels of government.
Torres nodded grimly. Already working on it, Admiral. But there's one more thing. The Zephyrians left behind some kind of long-range communications equipment. Our technicians think it was being used to coordinate with other fleets. This wasn't just an isolated attack, it was part of something bigger.
Chen closed her eyes, feeling the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. What they'd accomplished here was just the beginning. The Zephyrian hegemony had declared war on humanity, and they were fighting it with tactics that struck at the very heart of what made humans dangerous.
Thank you, Doctor. Take care of your people. We'll handle the rest.
As the transmission ended, Chen found herself staring out at the stars, wondering what other horrors were waiting for humanity in the darkness between worlds. The call that had summoned the Deathworlder fleet had been answered, but the war was far from over. The journey back to Earth took 3 days, with the combined fleet maintaining formation despite the damage many ships had sustained. Chen used the time to compile reports and analyze the intelligence they'd recovered from the Zephyrian operation. The picture that emerged was deeply troubling. The Zephyrian hegemony had been planning this war for years, studying human tactics and psychology with the kind of methodical precision that characterized their species. They'd identified humanity's greatest strength, their adaptability and determination, and decided to turn it against them. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed that humans would react like any other species, that they would negotiate and compromise when faced with overwhelming force. They hadn't counted on the Deathworlder response, the instinctive human reaction to double down and fight even harder when backed into a corner.
Admiral, Park's voice interrupted her thoughts.
We're receiving a priority transmission from Fleet Command.
It's coded for your eyes only.
Chen nodded and retreated to her ready room, where she activated the secure communication system. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the weathered face of Fleet Admiral Marcus Webb, the highest-ranking officer in the United Earth Navy.
Admiral Chun, Webb began without preamble. Congratulations on your victory at Kepler 442. The rescue of the colony and the destruction of the Zephyrian fleet has sent shock waves throughout the galaxy. But I'm afraid that's not why I'm calling.
Chen felt her stomach tighten.
What's happened, sir? Webb's expression grew even more grim. The Zephyrian hegemony has officially declared war on humanity. They've issued a statement calling us a plague species that must be contained or eliminated. Intelligence suggests they're mobilizing their entire fleet structure for a coordinated assault on human space. The words hit Chen like a physical blow. A full-scale war with the Zephyrian hegemony would be unlike anything humanity had faced before. The hegemony controlled dozens of star systems and had access to resources that dwarfed humanity's capabilities.
Sir, what are our orders? Webb leaned forward, his expression deadly serious. You're to proceed directly to Earth for immediate consultation with the Defense Council. Your success at Kepler 442 has made you something of a hero, Admiral. The politicians want to hear your recommendations for how we should respond to this threat. Chen nodded, though she felt the weight of the galaxy settling on her shoulders. I'll be there within 48 hours, sir.
There's one more thing, Webb continued.
The other galactic powers are watching this situation very closely. Some of them see this as an opportunity to test humanity's resolve. Others are worried about what happens if the Zephyrians succeed in their campaign against us.
What do you mean, sir? Webb's smile was grim. Admiral, whether we like it or not, humanity has become a major player in galactic politics.
Our victory at Kepler 442 proved that Deathworlders can't be ignored or dismissed. If we fall to the Zephyrians, other species will take note.
If we win, well, that might scare them even more.
The transmission ended, leaving Chen alone with her thoughts. She'd answered the call and saved the colony, but in doing so, she'd helped trigger a war that could reshape the galaxy. The question now was whether humanity was ready for what was coming. As the Prometheus approached Earth's solar system, Chen stood on the bridge watching the familiar blue-white dot grow larger in the viewscreen.
Home.
The world that had forged humanity in the fires of evolution and sent its children to the stars. Ma'am, Lieutenant Commander Park approached with a datapad.
We're receiving requests for interviews from every major news network in human space.
They're calling you the Admiral of the Deathworlder fleet.
Chen grimaced.
Fame was the last thing she wanted, especially when there was so much work still to be done.
Decline them all, Lieutenant. We have more important things to worry about. Yes, ma'am. But there's something else. I'm picking up dozens of ships moving toward Earth from across human space.
It looks like other fleets are answering the call, even though the immediate crisis is over. Chen turned to study the tactical display, watching as ship after ship appeared on the sensors.
The Russian Fifth Fleet was already in system, along with the Chinese Expeditionary Force and the Brazilian Deep Space Navy.
But there were others too, ships from colonies and nations that had never worked together before.
They're not just answering the call, she realized. They're preparing for war.
The thought should have been terrifying, but instead, Chen felt a surge of pride. Humanity might be facing its greatest challenge yet, but they were facing it together. The scattered nations and colonies that had spent decades arguing about trade rights and territorial disputes were finally united by a common threat.
The briefing at Fleet Command was everything Chen had expected and worse.
The Defense Council chambers were packed with officials from every major human government, along with representatives from the colonial administrations and the various fleet commands. Admiral Webb called the meeting to order, his voice carrying across the chamber with the authority of someone who'd spent his life in service to humanity.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to discuss humanity's response to the Zephyrian declaration of war. Admiral Chen, as the senior officer present during the Kepler 442 incident, please brief us on your assessment of the threat.
Chen stood, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon her. These were the people who would decide humanity's fate, and she needed to make them understand what they were facing.
The Zephyrian hegemony represents the most serious threat humanity has faced since first contact, she began.
They possess superior technology, greater numbers, and resources that dwarf our own.
But they've made a critical error in their assessment of human capabilities.
She paused, letting her words sink in.
They've studied our tactics and our technology, but they don't understand our psychology.
They think they can intimidate us into submission through displays of force.
They're wrong. Secretary of Defense Maria Santos leaned forward. Admiral, what's your assessment of our chances in a full-scale war?
Chen met her gaze steadily.
In a conventional conflict, we'd lose.
They have us outnumbered 3-1, and their technology is more advanced.
But this won't be a conventional conflict. Humanity doesn't fight fair, and we don't give up.
She gestured to the holographic display, which showed the current disposition of human forces. The response to the call at Kepler 442 proved that our fleets can work together when the stakes are high enough.
We've got ships from every major power responding to the crisis.
That's our strength, not our technology or our numbers, but our unity.
President Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Government spoke up. Admiral, what do you recommend as our next course of action?
Chen had been thinking about this question for days, and she had her answer ready.
We need to hit them where they don't expect it. The Zephyrians think they understand human tactics because they've studied our border skirmishes and police actions. They don't understand what humans are capable of when we're fighting for survival.
She manipulated the display, showing the known positions of Zephyrian fleets throughout the galaxy. They've deployed their forces in a standard occupation formation, designed to overwhelm our defenses through superior numbers. But that same formation leaves their supply lines vulnerable to the kind of deep strike operations that human forces excel at.
Admiral Webb nodded approvingly. What do you have in mind, Admiral? Operation Deathblow, Chen replied. We use our combined fleets to strike at their primary logistics bases simultaneously.
Cut off their supply lines, destroy their forward bases, and force them to fight on our terms instead of theirs. The room erupted in discussion as officials debated the merits of her proposal. Chen watched the political theater with growing impatience, knowing that every moment they delayed gave the Zephyrians more time to prepare.
Finally, President Vasquez called for order. Admiral Chen, you have the full support of the United Earth government. Admiral Webb, please coordinate with our allies to implement Operation Deathblow immediately. Webb nodded grimly. It will be done, Madam President. Admiral Chen, you'll be in overall command of the operation. The combined fleet is yours.
Chen felt the weight of command settle on her shoulders once again.
She'd answered the call and saved a colony, but now she was being asked to lead humanity's response to an existential threat.
The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure.
Thank you, sir. I won't let you down.
As the meeting dispersed, Chen found herself thinking about the magnitude of what they were about to attempt.
Operation Deathblow would require the coordination of hundreds of ships from dozens of different nations and colonies.
It would be the largest military operation in human history, and its success or failure would determine whether humanity survived as a free species. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation and coordination. Chen established her command center aboard the UES Prometheus, which had been hastily repaired and upgraded with the latest communication and tactical systems. Ships poured into the Sol system from across human space, creating the largest concentration of military power in human history. The logistics alone were staggering. Hundreds of ships from dozens of different nations, each with their own protocols, equipment, and tactical doctrines. Chen found herself working 18-hour days just to coordinate the basic operational requirements. But gradually, the pieces began to fall into place. The Russian Fifth Fleet would take point on the primary assault, their new plasma lance technology giving them the firepower needed to crack the Zephyrian defenses. The Chinese Expeditionary Force would handle the deep strike operations, their ships optimized for long-range raids. The American Colonial Fleet would coordinate the overall operation, their advanced communication systems providing the backbone for fleet-wide coordination. Admiral, Captain Morrison approached with the latest intelligence reports.
We've identified the primary Zephyrian logistics base.
It's in the Vega system, heavily fortified but not expecting an attack.
If we can take it out, we'll cripple their ability to supply their forward fleets.
Chen studied the tactical analysis, noting the massive orbital platforms and defensive arrays that protected the base. It would be a tough nut to crack, but not impossible.
What about the secondary targets?
12 systems total, all within striking distance of our forward bases. The simultaneous assault should overwhelm their ability to respond effectively. Chen nodded, feeling the familiar mix of anticipation and dread that preceded major operations.
Signal the fleet. We jump in 6 hours. The final briefing was held in the main hangar bay of the Prometheus, with representatives from every ship in the fleet attending via hologram.
Chen stood before the assembled officers, looking out at faces that represented every corner of human space. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice carrying across the vast space. In 6 hours, we will launch the largest military operation in human history.
Operation Deathblow will demonstrate to the galaxy that humanity cannot be intimidated, cannot be conquered, and will never surrender.
She paused, letting her words sink in. The Zephyrians chose to attack our civilians because they thought we were weak. They thought they could harvest our people like cattle.
Today, we show them what happens when Deathworlders unite.
The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of officers rose to their feet, their voices joining in a cheer that echoed through the hangar bay.
Chen felt a surge of pride and determination.
These were the children of Earth, and they were going to war. The jump to hyperspace was flawlessly coordinated, with over 300 ships disappearing into the void simultaneously. Chen stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching the star field shift and blur as they entered the tunnel between dimensions.
"Time to target," she asked. "4 hours, Admiral," Navigator Lieutenant Sarah Kim replied. "All ships are maintaining formation perfectly."
Chen nodded, though she knew the real test would come when they dropped back into normal space. The Zephyrians would be expecting some kind of response to their declaration of war, but not on this scale. The first sign of trouble came when they were still an hour out from the target system.
Long-range sensors detected unusual activity in the Vega system, ships moving in patterns that suggested they were preparing for battle.
"Admiral," Captain Morrison reported, his voice tight with concern.
"I'm detecting at least 60 Zephyrian ships in the target system. That's 3 times what intelligence predicted."
Chen felt her blood run cold. Either their intelligence had been wrong, or the Zephyrians had somehow learned about the operation. Either way, they were jumping into a trap.
"Signal the fleet," she ordered. "All ships prepare for immediate combat upon arrival. This is not going to be the surgical strike we planned."
The transition back to normal space was violent and chaotic. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, only to find themselves facing a Zephyrian armada that had been waiting for them.
"Incoming fire!" Morrison shouted.
All ships, evasive maneuvers. The opening moments of the battle were a nightmare of confusion and destruction. The Zephyrians had positioned themselves perfectly, creating overlapping fields of fire that caught the human fleet in a devastating crossfire. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light, their debris spinning away into the void. But the Deathworlder fleets had faced worse odds before. As the initial shock wore off, human captains began to adapt, using their superior tactical flexibility to turn the Zephyrians' ambush against them.
"Russian Fifth Fleet, execute flanking maneuver Alpha," Chen ordered. "Chinese Expeditionary Force, hit their left flank. American Colonial Fleet, target their command ships."
The battle raged for hours, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The Zephyrians had the benefit of prepared positions and superior numbers, but the human fleet fought with a desperation that made up for their technological disadvantages. The turning point came when Captain Vasquez of the RSS Valkyrie made a discovery that changed everything.
Her tactical officer had been analyzing the Zephyrian formation when he noticed something odd about their command and control patterns.